Grab their seats. There's Carm. Like I said, there's no outing can happen without Carm. So. That's right. All right. Well, again, thank you all for coming up to Placerville. It's an honor to have all of you here with us at our town hall. I was certain that this wasn't going to work, that this was going to be too small of an area, with our dais, but I thought we'd have people stuck up there as well. So thank you to staff. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for making this and the vision for the way it looks. So just want to thank everybody for that. With that, then, will everybody please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? And Supervisor Desmond, will you lead us? And to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. And Madam Clerk, could we please have roll call, please?
Thank you. Good morning. Just a quick housekeeping note. To speak in your microphone, you need to press and hold it down the entire time you're speaking. So just a note on that. Thank you for being here. Director Baines?
Present.
Bradford?
Bradford is present, and I am attending remotely as I am out of town on official Yuba County business and unable to attend in person. There is no one in the room with me.
Thank you, Director Bradford. Branscombe?
Yes.
Bullahan?
Here.
Chapman?
Here.
Desmond?
Here.
Dowden Calvillo?
Present.
Frost?
Here.
Gallardo?
Here.
Gog absent. Early for Guerrero?
Here.
Harris?
Here.
Howdeschelt?
Here.
Hume absent. Jennings absent. Joyner?
Here.
Jones?
Here.
Nisley?
Here.
Kozlowski? Lauren?
Here.
Lozano?
Here.
McCulley? Sander? Absent. Schaefer?
Here.
Teeter?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Vang absent. Vega?
Here.
Viegas?
Here.
Vice Chair Soon absent. Chair Saragosa?
Here.
And ex officio member Aceves?
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I do have a couple of quick items I wanted to go over before we jump into everything. And first, and it's not really a welcome, but it's sort of an official welcome. And that is to welcome Carolyn McCulley as our official SAGOG representative. She's been coming as the alternate, but Caroline, welcome as an official board member. So give her a hand. All right. I also, as we move forward and as we're getting closer to electing or nominating the next vice chair, chair and vice chair for the Board of SAGOGs, I had the pleasure of talking to several of you who have gracefully volunteered to be part of the committee for next year. So I want to just provide those names to the group, and those members for the 2025 nominating committee are directors Harris, Hauveschelt, Jennings, Lauren, Teeter, with Director Thomas serving as chair of that committee. So thank all of them for stepping up and doing that. I know you all had some of you are going to be doing this for a couple of years, had a nice smooth process. I think you've worked out a way to make it as easy as possible for both those on the committee as well as those putting their names forward. So thank you for stepping up and for your leadership on that. I really appreciate it. And I thought it was a good mix of newer board members and board members that are going to be leaving us and board members that are veterans on this. So it's a nice amount to really know like what they'll see in the next vice chair. On that note, if you do want to put your name in for the 2025 vice chair position, please submit your name to the clerk of the board, to Lynette, no later than Friday, October 11th. And we will make sure that those names get over to the nominating committee, and then they will work to whether schedule time or to, elicit feedback from you, and then provide that nominating committee recommendations at the December meeting. Is that right? Correct. They'll come back to December meeting, and then in January we will swear in the new 2025 chair and 2025 vice chair. So again, thank you all for your help on that. I greatly appreciate it. Okay, moving on to public communications. This is a time for anyone who wishes to address the board on an item that does not appear elsewhere on this agenda. Do we have a member of the public that wishes to comment, either in person or online?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. We will go to that new portion of the agenda, which is our disclosures. Directors will disclose any items in which they have a conflict of interest under state law and acknowledge that they will recuse themselves from that item. Among other state laws, the Levine Act may require recusal on items involving a contract or entitlement where a campaign donor is a participant. Are there any directors who need to disclose a conflict with any of the items on today's agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move ahead. And we will move to our presentation, which is really our welcome to all of you to Placerville and to El Dorado County. So again, thank you all for being here. And I'm going to call up my city manager, Cleve Morris, to just do a quick welcome from the city of Placerville.
Morning, morning, everyone. Welcome. That was quick, right? Welcome. Glad you could be here in Placerville. I love it here. Those of you who don't know me, I've been here about 14 years. I know Supervisor Thomas quite well. She came on the council almost the exact same month that I started working here in Placerville. And so we've worked together a lot. When we talked about on the bus ride, the Broadway trip, we've worked a lot on that, or the Broadway project up there and things that are going on there. Hopefully you enjoy your time here. Hopefully, it looks like you're going to be in meetings most of the time. Hopefully you can get a chance to enjoy our historic downtown and our other business districts. Just want to mention we've got some fantastic restaurants. If you don't get there this time, come back. Just mention quickly that if any of you watched the Food Channel a couple of months ago, we were on one of the Food Channel networks for Best Bites in Town that was done here in Placerville, and they went through 4 restaurants and chose a winner for a certain food that they did. So a lot of exciting things, fun things to do. The other thing I'll mention, if you haven't been to our Goldbug Park and walked into a authentic gold mine, come back and do that sometime too. We have a lot of fun things to do in Placerville. Welcome to Placerville. Thank you.
Cleve. Okay, so holds it down. Cleve, I want to thank you as well for hosting us today. Town Hall was a perfect location, and give you an idea of Cleve's leadership. He came in yesterday and said, we need to buff the floors for SACOG. So Cleve made sure the floors were buffed. So thank you for the warm welcome and hospitality. And It's my pleasure now to introduce to you our Assistant CAO with El Dorado County, Laura Schwartz. Laura has been with the county for over 23 years, and she knows everything about this county and has her hand in just about every aspect of it. We are very, very blessed by her leadership and grateful that she is able to be with us today to welcome you on behalf of El Dorado County. So with that, please welcome Laura Schwartz.
Thank you. Well, welcome everyone to El Dorado County. As Wendy said, I've been with the county for a little over 23 years, and I've been a resident of El Dorado County for almost 30 years. I had the pleasure of raising my kids here. My oldest son just recently purchased his first home in Shingle Springs in El Dorado County. So very, very excited to hopefully stay here for the rest of my life and maybe have some grandkids here shortly in the future that will continue on in the county. So I'm very passionate about the county. It's a beautiful county. A little bit just about actually our county processes. We're very grateful for our partnership with SACOG. A lot of the things that SACOG does ties directly in with our county's strategic plan. We just recently last year did a complete refresh of our strategic plan. It was a great process. Had a lot of public involvement, a lot of involvement with all of our department heads. We had a great facilitator, a gentleman by the name of Robert Bendorf. Some of you may know him very well. Fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed working with him. Actually made a friend for life with him. We still keep in contact over a lot of things. So he was able to kind of help facilitate, and we came up with some basically 5 focus areas. And I think SACOG really touches each of these areas. The first being safe and healthy communities. Again, that's really kind of a focus on disaster preparedness and resiliency. As we all know, wildfires are, greatly impact this area. We've already had, I think, 2 or 3 this season alone. So that is definitely a priority for our county, as well as housing, support services for the unhoused, kind of implementation of CalAIM, quite a few things that are within that area as well. Public infrastructure, another area, obviously, that SACOG plays a very large part in. Not just, our road infrastructure, that's probably the biggest piece, our facilities. We're in the process of updating our parks master plan. So a lot of pieces, broadband that come into that piece. Workforce excellence is another area that the board has really tried to focus on. While we have the beauty of our county, and I came to the county because I lived in the county, we do struggle sometimes, being competitive, with Sacramento and Placer. That's an area that we sometimes, we just can't compete. So really looking at how we can provide opportunities for our workforce through training, through, our workforce culture, our leadership, building that leadership team. So that is another area that the board is focusing on. Thriving economy, another area that I think SACOG plays a very big part of. We're in the middle of creating an economic strategic plan with our economic development. Trying to create very, business-friendly environments. We've given a lot of grants to small businesses. And so that is another area. And finally, a new area for us, and Robert Bendorf actually kind of helped us develop this one, and it's brand new, or we're really just starting to kick it off, strategic innovation. And so this is kind of a catch-all in some ways. Some of the things that we're looking at there is, how does the county work as one organization? So, how do we bring all of our departments together? How do we work with our partner agencies and really create, that cohesive network, so that we're all kind of working towards the same goals. Also looking at, what are some of our challenges, and trying to come up with some strategic ideas, some new ideas, kind of thinking out of the box of how we deal with those. So in a nutshell, just real briefly, I know you guys have a lot on your agenda, but just kind of wanted to give you a sense of where El Dorado County is and the direction that we're heading. And again, welcome you all to our beautiful county. I hope you do get a chance to see more today. And we really appreciate, each and every one of you and all that SACOG does with partnering with El Dorado County. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Director Zaragoza. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you, Cleve. Appreciate that. And you'll hear a little bit more from Wendy and I when Woody does his presentation a little bit later into today's agenda. So with that, let me get my place here again. So with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn as the SACOG Board of Directors and reconvene as the Capital Valley Regional Safe Authority. And we have a couple of tough trying to hold down the button and flip pages at the same time. I need to improve my skills here. You'd be my button. So we have two consent items on the CVR Safe agenda, which is to approve the minutes of the June 20th, 2024 meeting, and the second, the renewal of a contract agreement with Castle Rock Associates for our 511 StarNet maintenance and operations. These items are intended to be approved in one motion. However, anyone can remove an item for a separate discussion. Does any director wish to remove an item on today's consent agenda? All right, seeing none.
To the chair.
Move
Move to approve.
All right, thank you. All right, we have a first and a second. Lynette, is there anyone in the public that wishes to make comments on this item?
There's no public comment, but we do need to take a roll call vote because Director Bradford's participating online.
Yes. All right. So with no public comments, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote, please.
Thank you. Director Baines,
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Yes.
Houlihan,
Aye.
Chapman,
Aye.
Desmond,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Frost,
Aye.
Gallardo,
Aye.
Gog. Absent Director Early for Guerrero,
Aye.
Harris,
Yeah.
Howdeshelt,
Aye.
Hume absent, Jennings absent, Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Nisley,
Yes.
Kozlowski. I'll note him absent. He may have stepped out. Lauren, Lozano,
Aye.
McCully, Sander absent, Schaefer,
Aye.
Teeter, Thomas,
Aye.
Vang, absent Vega,
Aye.
Viegas,
Aye.
Young absent, Rickman absent, Vice Chair Soon absent, and Chair Saragosa.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. The CVR Safe Board meeting is now adjourned and we reconvene as SACOG. I like these short board meetings like that. We will move on to the consent calendar. And before we take up the consent calendar, I know our general counsel, Mike Maurer, would like to have a brief comment on agenda item 11, which is to make an amendment to the employment agreement with our executive director. So with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Maurer.
So thank you, Chair. The Brown Act requires that anything involving we give an oral report first. So we can simply approve this as part of the consent agenda unless anyone wants to pull it. But just to comply with the Brown Act and give the oral, the action, you're right, this is very hard to do. The action would modify the employment agreement for the executive director so that 5% of then current base salary plus $350 per month would be contributed to a 401(a) defined contribution plan. And then the executive director would have an option, as long as SACOG maintains a 457 deferred compensation plan, to put a portion of base salary into that 457 deferred compensation plan up to the IRS limit. And so that would be the change to the agreement. I'll note it just changes the amounts between the two separate plans. It's not actually adding any cost to SACOG. And so with that, we've met our Brown Act requirements. We can proceed with the consent calendar. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Does anyone, whether that issue or any other consent item, wish to pull an item? All right. Seeing none. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve items 1 through 11 on the consent.
Early seconds.
All right, great. And do we have any other public comments on this items?
There's no public comment.
All right, so roll call, please.
Thank you, Director Baines,
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Yes.
Houlihan,
Aye.
Chapman, Desmond,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Frost,
Aye.
Gallardo,
Aye.
Gog absent, Early for Guerrero,
Aye.
Harris,
Yes.
Howdeshelt,
Aye.
Hume absent, Jennings absent, Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Nicely,
Yes.
Kozlowski, absent, Lauren, absent, Lozano,
Aye.
McCully,
Aye.
Sander absent, Schaefer,
Aye.
Teeter, Thomas,
Aye.
Vang, absent, Vega,
Aye.
Villegas,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon absent, and Chair Saragosa.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to go ahead and move into our action item for this morning. That's item 12, and that's the 2025 Regional Active Transportation Program Policy Framework Amendment. And Ms. Lopez has this item for us this morning.
Thank you so much. Oop. Good morning. My name is Summer Lopez. I'm a senior planner at SACOG and the program manager of the Regional Active Transportation Program. So today I'll be presenting item number 12. This is an action item on the 2025 Regional ATP Policy Framework. As a reminder, the Active Transportation Program, or ATP, is a statewide funding program that's meant to increase walking and bicycling throughout the state. It is a three-component funding program that consists of statewide, small urban and rural, and MPO. MPO component is managed by SACOG in partnership with EDCTC and PCTPA. This item did come before you once before in April, where you approved it as the original policy framework for cycle 7. However, there have been some revisions to the budget, and so this amendment addresses that. We're currently nearing the end of the call for projects for our regional call for projects. We extended that deadline from August 30th to September 30th, so we're getting close to that. We're giving agencies a chance to make revisions to their applications based on the information I'm sharing with you. The statewide schedule has not changed, so the announcement should be put out by the state by November 1st, and then regional will come back to you next year in this early spring. So the governor's budget revise reduced the ATP statewide budget by $400 million. So that takes it from $568.7 million to $168.7 million. Our regional budget is being reduced from $15.9 million to $4.7 million. The CTC amended their guidelines last month to address these revisions and to provide a little more flexibility to MPOs administering their own program. So they are allowing MPOs to accept applications for pre-construction phases, which we will be doing this cycle. And our amended regional framework, which is attachment A in your packet, is really meant to align with the CTC's amendment and to give us a little more flexibility so that the program remains competitive throughout the region this cycle and just gives us a little more structure. So these are the two options that were presented at the Transportation Committee earlier this month. The blue is option 1, that's staff's recommendation, 1 application per agency at a maximum of $2 million for their request. Option number 2 is an alternative option, which is 1 application per agency at a maximum of $1 million. The benefit of doing $2 million for staff's recommendation is that it gives agencies the opportunity to request multiple pre-construction phases and hopefully help them to be more construction ready, if not ready for construction once ATP Cycle 8 comes around, or if they apply for an alternative funding program. Additionally, it also could be enough for them to fund a small construction project or a small portion of their construction at that $2 million. The downside of this option is that we may end up funding less applicants this year. So on the low end, that could be possibly 3 applications, especially if agencies are requesting that maximum $2 million. For the alternative option at 1 application per agency at a maximum of $1 million, the benefit of this is that we could fund more applicants. So on the low end, that could be 5 applications. However, it could remove the option for agencies to request multiple pre-construction phases or all of their pre-construction, which, as a reminder, that's things like right-of-way, design, environmental, things like that. And it would likely also remove the opportunity for them to apply for construction funds, even for small construction. $1 million is just not quite enough for them to fund a construction project. So these are the options. Again, this is an action item. Trying to go to the next slide. There we go. The recommendation is that the board adopts the amended 2025 Regional ATP Policy Framework. Again, that's attachment A, and that we set that project limit to one application per agency at a maximum of $2 million. I'm happy to take any comments or questions that you might have.
Thank you, Summer, for the presentation. And can you give us, I don't know, this past committee, we came with one opposition vote on this item.
Correct. So the So if I can summarize the comment from the committee meeting. So the comment was that we would like to be able to distribute the 4.7 million as much as we can across the region. And Director Howdeshelt felt that if we were able to set it at 1 million, then there may be a likelihood to fund more applications, in which case maybe we would be able to spread that more around the region. With staff's recommendation of the 2 million, the primary focus of that is being able to still fund some construction if possible. But again, happy to take any other comments or feedback that you guys might have on that.
Great. Appreciate that. I just wanted to set the table for everyone to know why this item was before us. So if anyone has questions, or Bruce, if you want to say anything.
No, I think the only. Cleve, I think you need more than broadband. Anyway, no, I was concerned because there was a significant cut in the amount this year. And while staff, and I respect staff's professional experience, thought that the funding would go back up in future years, I just thought we should err on the side of ensuring that we were as inclusive as possible in case we're in a longer cycle where the state is going to be cutting back money. So I think that's the only thing. Thank you, though, Summer, for representing my concerns.
I actually found something to respond to that as well, just to share with you. So I was ready to give you this information. I found that the CTC's budget agreement for this reduction actually stipulates that the 400 million could come back this cycle within the next budget year. I know that's not a promise, but I did want to note that it is written somewhere within their budget agreement. So there's, a little more concrete evidence, hopefully, again, that we might get that funding, but I definitely hear that concern.
Do we have any other director comments, questions?
Chair, if I might, with that, I love staff. So I'll remove any opposition that I previously expressed.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Lynette, do we have any public comments?
There's no public comment.
All right, I'll close public comments, bring it back to the board.
Mr. Chairman, I'll recommend that we adopt staff's recommendation number 1.
Thomas, second.
Great. We have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Baines,
Aye.
Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Yes.
Houlihan,
Aye.
Chapman,
Aye.
Desmond,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Frost,
Aye.
Dialdo,
Yes.
Gog, absent, Early for Guerrero,
Aye.
Harris,
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Conditional, yes.
Thank you. Hume, absent, Jennings, absent, Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Nisley,
Yes.
Kozlowski,
Yes.
Lauren,
Aye.
Lozano,
Aye.
McCully, Sander, absent, Schaefer,
Aye.
Teeter, Thomas,
Aye.
Ving, absent, Vega,
Aye.
Villegas,
Aye.
Vice Chair Soon, absent, and Chair Saragosa.
Aye.
Thank you.
Chair Saragosa, if I might, just to put it in context, I appreciate staff's presentation and Director Howdeshelt. The last time out on ATP, so to the topic of if we have a regional funding round across 6 counties, right? How do we make sure all 6 counties can compete? We had 45 million in the last ATP cycle, and every county did well. In fact, I know there was a major project here in El Dorado County that got funded. There was several in Placer County. This is 4. So we're talking about the transportation funding round, right? All 6 counties together. The Director Thomas will report out on this later this board meeting.
somewhere between 100 and 200 million across all 6 counties gives us enough really sort of bandwidth, if you will, to fund good projects. We're talking 4. So I just want to set your expectations appropriately that this is not the funding round where you can come in and expect every jurisdiction will do well. So give our staff a lot of credit and some patience.
No, well said. Thank you, James. Okay, we're going to move on to our information items. And the first one is our advocacy update and AB 350 revisit.
Apologies, Chair Saragosa. We do have an online attendee who just raised their hand. They may have a comment regarding this last item.
Yeah.
Would you like them to go ahead and
Sure.
speak now? Okay. Diddy, can you promote that speaker? Thank you, so they can speak.
Thank you. This is Jeffrey Tardigui in Sacramento. And effectively, my comment is that unfortunately, the way the Zoom is set up here, I have no idea how many members of, should we say, are present. Trying to count them was a little difficulty to see who was and wasn't. Just for this is the last meeting you're having away, but just note that for public comment, it is very difficult to note, but thank you for noticing me. I will continue listening and hearing what's going on. But that's my public comment, just because it's difficult. I hope other people are listening and hearing, but I have no idea how many people are even participating in this meeting. Thank you. Good to hear.
All right, thank you for your comment. All right, we'll go ahead and move to our information items. And again, this is item 13, advocacy update and AB 350 revisit. And just before I hand it over to Christina, so this will be my third bite at the apple on AB 350. We discussed this at SBC and then at Policy and Innovation, and then now we're bringing it forward to the entire board. It's critically important for us as a board and where we go in picking the path we think is going to be the right path for us legislatively going forward. And Christina and Chris and team will give you more information. But I just want to underscore that. I'll have more to say later, but I just wanted to underscore it's 3 bites at the apple for some of us already, and it'll be 4.
Very appropriate. And you just did it.
I had to get it in there.
Bite apple.
So it may be you have to weave it into your comments. So with that, I will hand it over to Christina.
Thank you, Chair. Christina Lockie, I'm the Director of Government and Public Affairs for SACOG. And for the advocacy item today, we've asked our state lobbyist Politico group to walk us through our potential options for our next Sustainable Community Strategy or SCS updates after our current blueprint plan is adopted next year. As a reminder, last year we sponsored a bill, AB 350, that gave us an additional 2 years to complete our blueprint until 2025. But now we must think about what happens after that. It was a one-time shot. And so if all things stay the same, our next plan will be due in 2027. As the chair mentioned, the Strategic Planning Committee held a committee retreat and had a conversation about this a few weeks ago. There's also been a discussion at the Planning and Innovation Committee as well. And Politico Group is going to walk through that same presentation today and walk through our 3 options and the risks and benefits for all of those. The direction from the Strategic Planning Committee and the conversation at the Policy and Innovation Committee was that it was important to bring all 3 options to the board, but to really focus on options 1 and 2. And so you'll see that in Chris Lee's presentation today. The hope today is that the board will have a robust conversation about the possible options and the implications of each option and provide direction to staff about which direction we should move forward, with the goal of bringing an action item to the board next month, giving us the explicit direction of which option we should move forward with. And so now Chris Lee with Politico Group is going to walk us through the presentation.
Welcome to Placerville, Chris.
Thank you. Good morning. Again, Chris Lee, partner with Politico Group. And we have some slides here, and I think I can advance them because I don't have to hold down my microphone button. So got to speak up here. No, maybe not. Oh, could we go to the next slide? Great. So just a brief overview of the presentation. First, want to do a quick refresher on what was included in AB 350, move on to a discussion about the different potential next steps for legislation, and then finally give an opportunity for the board to discuss the options and ask any questions of me or of staff that you might have. Next slide, please. So as Christina just mentioned, AB 350, sponsored by Assemblymember Majority Leader Aguiar Curry in 2023, provided SACOG approximately 2 additional years to complete the SCS update. One of the selling points of this bill when we were talking to the legislature about it was it aligned the SCS schedule with the Metropolitan Transportation Commission out of the Bay Area and got the date a lot closer to the San Joaquin Council of Governments. So really an opportunity to improve that mega regional coordination and alignment on planning. Stakeholders, legislature, and SACOG, unfortunately, couldn't reach agreement on one key issue while this bill was going through the legislative process, and that was how does the timing for the Sustainable Community Strategy update play into the schedule for the housing element update? So we were going kind of in the mid part of the 8-year housing element cycle, and so luckily, we were able to come up with a compromise to address all the various stakeholder concerns. There was proposed language from the Department of Housing and Community Development. There were stakeholder concerns with that. The committee, policy committee in the Senate in particular was concerned about HCD's language, and we simply just couldn't reach agreement. And so the compromise that we struck to keep the bill moving and ensure that we were in compliance with the SCS, particularly for this last round or current round of competitive SB1 transportation grants, was to reset the schedule after 2027. So the bill doesn't have a sunset. It's really set up as we're doing this one-time change, and then barring any other future legislative changes, that schedule would go back to the 2027 schedule without any further legislation required. Can we go to the next slide? So we've got a few different options here, and I'm going to pull my slides up because I'm having trouble seeing.
Excuse me, real quickly.
Yes.
Who are the stakeholders when you refer to them?
So when we're doing anything in the sustainable community strategy space, you have transportation, you've got climate, you've got housing. And so to put a really fine point on it in terms of what happened in the legislative process last year when we were in the Senate Appropriations Committee, is the Department of Housing and Community Development said, we would like to provide you technical assistance, which in most cases is a very strong suggestion from the administration that you should take this language or we may not look fondly upon your bill, to say that the housing element and the SCS update will follow the same calendar. So you're pushing the 2027 date out. I'm sorry, pushing the update out to 2025. They said, let's also extend the housing element schedule. Folks in the housing community said, well, that would mean you essentially had a 10-year housing element cycle in the SACOG region when you had only initially planned for 8, and therefore we have some concerns about that. So that was the key stakeholders that expressed strong concerns were in the housing space, and it was housing advocates on one side of the issue and the Department of Housing and Community Development on the other side of the issue.
Thank you.
Chris, does that mean the Building Industry Association, or when you say housing advocates?
So we were talking to local North State Building Industry Association, the statewide Building Industry Association, and then a lot of statewide housing groups, for instance, folks who represent Public Interest Law Project, California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, various groups of that nature, as well as kind of YIMBY pro-housing groups, which are increasingly prominent in the legislative space.
Within the stakeholder community, who ended up happy and who ended up unhappy?
I think with the compromise, everyone was sufficiently happy to not oppose the bill. So, but as you all know, we're talking about really core issues here in the SCS. the trade-offs between climate, between jobs and economic development, between housing, affordability, all of these things. It's a very complex area of the law, and the politics are very complicated with all the different stakeholders that care about these regional plans that you undertake. Thanks. Great. So 3 potential options really presented themselves before us for how we address this 2027 reset, as we've called it in the slides. So the first option is simply do not pursue additional legislation and maintain that 2027 update timeline that's in the existing law. So the main difficulty and difference here would be typically you have a much longer time frame to do the plan update. This would give you would do a 2025 update that you're working on now, and then 2 years after that, another SCS update. The second option would be to make the new schedule permanent. So to push out the next plan to the typical 4-year time frame and keep the housing element on the 8-year cycle. So the complexity here would be that the housing element updates would precede the sustainable community strategy update. So that's a different schedule than is typical under SB 375, and it's different than what SACOG has done in the past. And then a third option is to make the new schedule permanent, but to resync the housing element and the RENA process with the SCS. And that's the option that would say you suddenly have a 10-year housing element and this current housing element that you're all operating under, rather than the 8-year cycle that was planned for. And we had quite a bit of discussion on option number 3 at the policy retreat, as well as at the committee. And this is one option where I think me personally, as your advocate, as well as staff and during the board member discussion, is one that we find to be we know that this is a controversial option because of the experience of AB 350. We're also very concerned that the type of concessions that various stakeholder groups might want to push for in a bill that gave us that 10-year housing element cycle might be very difficult for jurisdictions, for home builders, for others to swallow. We don't know exactly what those are, but we think that this is perhaps the most politically difficult option and is one that the direction to date has been, let's put this one to the side. Just a brief note about timing, because really in the legislative process, the calendar controls a lot. And so our ideal time frame to pursue each of these options is the beginning at the next 2-year legislative session. That really gives us the opportunity to give this a thorough vetting. It gives us an opportunity to take a pause and have the bill proceed over a 2-year session rather than being hung out and having just 1 year where you need to make the change. Could we go to the next slide? So I'm sorry, this is a little small. Hopefully you have it printed in your packet as well. But this is option 1. So benefits and key risks that are presented by each of these options. The first is, this does not require a bill. This is basically, we're going to follow what is written in existing law. So while there may be, a different process for how you do the plan development within SACOG, you don't need to go to the legislature to ask them for additional authority. Key risk of this are, CARB is beginning to work on the updates to the greenhouse gas emissions reductions targets, and there's a high likelihood that that new target could apply to this 2027 update. So you could be trying to hit a different per capita VMT reduction or GHG reduction target in the planning process in this accelerated timeframe. There's also the earliest risk of needing to adopt pursuant potentially to those more ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets, an alternative planning strategy under SB 375. So that's essentially the option in SB 375 if you can't adopt an SCS that, if implemented, would achieve the emissions reductions targets. Why is that significant? There's 3 SB1 competitive transportation plan programs that require you to have an SCS that, if implemented, would hit the target, and where either by statute or state regulation, an APS does not allow you to meet the eligibility requirements. Those programs are the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. That's in statute. The eligibility piece is in statute. The Trade Corridors Enhancement Program, again, a statutory requirement. And then finally, for those counties in the region that have self-help measures, the Local Partnership Program, and that is something that was done by program guidelines with the CTC. So options to mitigate these risks. There's definitely interest among transportation industry groups and potentially other regional stakeholders around the state to revisit those funding limitations in the SB1 grant programs. Really, an APS is an option under the law that calls into question, why would we withhold eligibility when we're following just, a statutory option that's laid out? And we do think that there are going to be, the Central Valley, for instance, right now is in the process of updating their SCSs. They're all basically on the same time frame. And what we've heard from clients we have in the area, as well as other conversations, is there's a high risk that others in the state might not be able to adopt an SCS that meets the target. And therefore, we won't be the only one potentially in this boat. So there's a potential stakeholder effort with others who are interested in making sure, significant areas of the state aren't cut out from these very significant funding programs. Move on to the next slide, please. So option number 2, so this is essentially the option that would keep the housing element on the 8-year cycle and rearrange how the housing element and the SCS update happen in practice. I think the key benefit of this, and it's a little bit ironic given what we went through with the AB 350 amendment discussion, is that this aligns with a recent recommendation that the department prepared pursuant to a legislative request called California's Housing Future 2040. And the idea behind the recommendation, and we can provide the very specific language if you're interested, is that the SCS process should be much more driven by the housing element and the housing planning component. The other benefit, so to the extent that that carries a lot of weight in the legislature, and certainly it would carry weight with the administration, that is a benefit of this approach. The other benefit is it would maintain the SCS alignment. So you would be on that same schedule as MTC. So to the extent that that's helping better coordinate transportation planning, particularly across the regions, that's a helpful thing. Key risk of this approach, obviously it requires new legislation. Anytime you're going to the legislature asking for an exception to how a process normally works in law, stakeholders can come out of the woodwork, ask for concessions in order to provide SACOG with that flexibility. We don't know what those might be. Other regional agencies might be concerned with departing from the precedent of how things have operated under SB 375. There was at least one bill in the last session that tried to, in a bit of a prescriptive and just difficult, I would say, manner, tried to do some of this. It's AB 1335 by Assemblymember Zabur. And that was met with a lot of concerns by the Southern California Association of Governments and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. This isn't exactly the same thing, but it's the same principle in terms of the housing kind of being the thing that drives the SCS versus more of the transportation investments, to dramatically oversimplify. And so one potential concern about this is if other regions see this as something that they do not want to do, then having SACOG essentially pilot this approach might be something that they either don't support or express concerns about to their delegations. And then finally, SACOG may still need to adopt an APS if the greenhouse gas targets are not achievable, right? So that may, happen either way. So options to mitigate the risk really, stress that this is an option to pilot the HCD recommendations that might, relieve some concerns by other regions, and then really working with the regional stakeholders to build support with key groups. So as always, we would want to work with local housing advocates, home builders, equity groups, business groups, and others to stress why this is so important to the region. We could go to the next slide. Okay, so this one's in this time. Okay, so key benefits of option 3, really the functional process would be the same. So your RENA would trail the adoption of the SCS, maintains mega region alignment, but as we mentioned, it would delay by 2 years the housing element update. The governor is having a press conference right now where I think he's signing 30-something housing bills, highlighting 6 that are focused on enforcement. I think the narrative that we're trying to delay the housing element is just, in this political environment, a very, very difficult proposition. You would be aligning your housing element update with the Bay Area. 109 jurisdictions, I believe. There was legislation this year to kind of bifurcate the timing for SCAG. So workforce concerns within HCD are something the administration cares enough about to, consider legislation on that topic. And then again, you'll notice a theme, may still need to adopt an APS. The options to mitigate the risk, I think the most important thing here would be to make sure that all of the housing stakeholders on really all sides of the debate were comfortable with the approach in the SACOG region and could help their statewide counterparts get there. But again, we tend to think that this is a very difficult and politically dicey option. So next slide, please. All right, so I know that's a lot. Hopefully we've laid out staff's best thinking on the different options, but very interested to answer any questions that might come up, and turn it over back to the board chair.
All right, thank you, Chris. And as you can tell, a lot of information out there. So I want to make sure everybody just even has a baseline understanding of everything that was put out there, because it's a lot. And again, I just want to reiterate on the option 3, because of the housing lobby within the state legislature. It was just, what happened with our original bill, I don't see anything changing in 2 years that would make that a different path. And so I think we'd end up having a bill, have some serious problems right off the bat. So it's why we wanted to give, full transparency and put them all 3 out there. But I do think if for some reason we wanted to pick option 3, it would be a very difficult road for us to achieve and put SACOG in the best place possible. And so we've tried to focus in on 1 and 2, but certainly ask questions for Chris or staff. James, I don't know if you want to add anything here on the front end. I was also going to ask Jill, as our policy and innovation chair, if she wanted to share a few words as well.
Sure, I'll and I've spoken with some of you about this. I'll start. I think to boil it down, and if you just sort of take option 3 off the table, you'll think about the first 2. We can either spend quite a bit of time and energy, and those of you that worked on AB 350 last year, you remember the time and energy we spent. Our plan back 2 more years, right, to go back to 29 and keep it on that schedule, where I think we have a very high risk of not being able to meet the greenhouse gas target. So we buy 2 more years to not achieve the or we can actually, that mitigation on option 1 really is change the rules of the game. And we are talking already with some of our partners across the state on how can we still meet some of the state goals, but not have these sticks, right, of losing all the money, which is just untenable. So I think, as I've said to some of you, really, this is today's discussion. Next month will be action. We cannot do both of those well, so we need you to give us direction to choose one path.
I'll hand it over to Jill.
Thank you. As you said, both with strategic planning and with policy and innovation, we've put a great deal of time and effort in this. I think often when things come to us, there's usually is a kind of an obvious, this is probably the way to go. That's just truly not the case on this. It's really taken, and hopefully you have confidence that some of us that have really dug into the weeds on this, three, being honest with you, it's not really an option. So we got down to 1 and 2, and there's a whole lot of guesswork we're doing with this because we just don't know. But I'm really appreciative of the hard work they've done and to make this happen. I know option 1, the timeline is going to be tough. I will tell you personally, from all the work we've done, I think it's probably the most realistic way to go. But it's something. Please do your work. Please dig in and look into it. Ask the folks that have been doing this. And I say it's the first time. It's not like we can say, oh, we picked the wrong one. We really are doing the best guess we can with what we have to work with and what the legislature will do. So thank you for the opportunity. Again, we put a ton of time in. So I'm looking forward to our next meeting. But please know you're going to read it and you're going to go, well, this might and this might. And you're right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I said a question, maybe for James. So if we, obviously either option 1 or option 2 is going to require legislation, either one. I mean, option 1 to try to mitigate some of the challenges we're going to face when we achieve non-attainment. What would be our legislative strategy in terms of what coalition would join us in the efforts for either option 1 or option 2? Can you talk about that a little bit?
See if Chris actually wants to start on this.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Director. I think that the really clear answer for me is option 1 is an option where there will be other stakeholders that have very strong skin in the game. The folks who build the projects, people who rely on those, and then the regions who are trying to access the funding. And so there really is opportunity, and we've already been having conversations with various statewide groups, Transportation California, who my business partner, Kiana Valentine, also works with, as well as the California Association of Councils of Government. So we think that is one where not only will there be a coalition, but it's a coalition of people with skin in the game. Contrast that with option 2, where it's a SACOG-driven thing. It's a district-specific bill. We might get soft support from various groups, but it's like, yeah, this would be nice. We don't mind if this happens, but no skin off our teeth if it gets vetoed, right? So can build the type of coalition we built around AB 350, hopefully, but the dynamic of how much do those supporters really have buy-in is the key difference.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yes, Mike.
My question is actually going to be the opposite of that. Who's the anti-sponsors that will run up against?
Director Kozlowski, could you use your microphone? Sorry, thank you.
Hold it down. Hold it down. There it is. Keep that green light going.
All right. So my question.
That's keep us talking short,
Yeah. My question is as American as apple pie, which is who are the anti-sponsors that will run up against? So the opposite of what you just answered.
Yeah,
in both scenarios.
Exactly. So the big concern on option 1 would be we've seen over the last few legislative sessions a lot of environmental groups that are very concerned about, are we going to be able to meet the targeted reductions from the transportation sector to hit those climate goals that the state has laid out? And so those are folks that have run various bills attempting to say, we're going to, take these programs and say, we don't want any new capacity, things of that nature. So to the extent that people view those SB1 provisions as a stick to get us to emissions reductions, those are the sorts of groups that would be on the opposite side of a coalition effort to revise that SB1 eligibility criteria.
Is there some principal group that would be leading that kind of effort?
if you look at who's been leading
I want you to name
legislative
names.
efforts, yeah, Natural Resources Defense Council, Climate Plan, and a lot of, there's a lot of environmental justice groups and smaller groups that have coordinated around that issue. And then on option 2, I think it's much less. What I'm most concerned about there is the just the uncertainty. Like for instance, we had HCD basically say, oh yeah, you should realign the housing element with this new schedule. And it was kind of a very technical sort of approach. And then a few months later, they come out with a recommendation that says, hey, actually, the housing element should really inform the SCS, right? And so there's an element of unpredictability there. And I really do worry about some of our larger regional partners. If they're like, no, we really don't want to upset the apple cart on how this process works, they don't have to publicly oppose it, but by expressing those concerns, oh, I did it. Yeah. That's like, what are you laughing at? Apple reference. But anyway, so I there's just a lot of uncertainty there, and there's not the, as mentioned, shared, I think the best we'll get from other partners is this is not harmful for us and maybe we'll support it, but we're not going to go to the map.
Director Kozlowski, can I
not support?
Can I just jump in with a thought, which may be around kind of beginning to message or think about this? I don't think when we say we want to change the rules of the game, right? It's really hard to meet our greenhouse gas targets. I think specifically what we're saying is if we fail the state's environmental goals, the idea that you would give us less money is not tenable, right? If we were a failing school district, the idea would be you'd give us less money, right? So I do think it's important to sort of begin to think about how we might frame this, which is kind of like green means go. Remember, we've said to the state, we understand your mandate. Let us solve your problem on our terms, right? The green means go is an economic development and housing play that meets the state mandate, but on our terms. So I think that this is going to be real. I'm not saying that'll diminish your opposition, but I'm saying I think it's important as we enter into this with our partners. Look, we want to meet it. We want to meet environmental goals reasonably, pragmatically. And if there's fund us to do the right thing rather than give us a stick.
Yeah, I think, Mike, to your question as well, there's going to be some built-in administrative hurdles to come over as well on this. I think, they've been mandated to do certain things. And so for us to come back and say, that's great, and we want to do them, but we need X time to be able to do it. So you're going to run into some, I think, issues there in addition to third parties and other groups on the outside that will have some questions. But I do think regarding ACS, and if you don't get an SCS forward, but you move forward with an ACS, it's certainly in statute. The question being, can we get to a point where an ACS can be adopted without having your wings clipped? So maybe that's for a cycle. You have an ACS, but you got to be able to get out of that ACS in an X amount of time. So I do think there's some opportunities potentially there, but again, it's gonna take some work. And yes, Alice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take another bite of the apple here. So there you go. I've had the opportunity to discuss this a couple of different times, once with the policy committee, and then we had a separate meeting to talk about it. And, for me, I feel, I certainly respect there are two options, but for me, really at this point, I know we're not asking for direction, but option one to me is the best route. I think that there's powers in numbers, and I appreciate the fact that we can work with a variety of stakeholders to pursue that SB1 grant funding limitation issue. And I want to be able to retain control too. I hate to go through legislation and have, HCD completely dictate something different to us. And I really think that option one at this point, we have more control. And I think working with that strong mixed stakeholder group, which we've already begun discussions, and we know that they're on the same table, that that would be a more responsible and hopefully successful route. So I know we're going to continue to think about this, but it's a little more, for me personally, a little more clear cut, and I'm certainly in support of option one.
Thank you, Director. Director Villegas.
Thank you. And I would concur. And back to Mike's comment about kind of the who would oppose it. I think we are at the risk of maybe just generalizing the notion of having to navigate a legislative fix right now through this legislature is a lot of unknowns. And the reality is, even if it identifies, lines up, and actually accomplishes much of what the state's policy objectives are as a region, we have to navigate through a legislative process that frankly gives us little to no certainty that even if we got to the right policy committees, got to the right legislative representatives, which we have wonderful representation, the reality is that the influences that are coming into the Capitol make it almost impossible to create any level of certainty that we can afford, given that funding is at risk. And so I wanted to go back to your question. I mean, you maybe can't say that because you got to work there all day long and you have to have people open the doors when you knock. We don't as much, right? And so I'm simply capturing what I feel as though, and we've had at least 3 different discussions around this issue. So option one, I think, sort of minimizes our risk, given how much we have at risk in light of the process of trying to get a legislative fix. And I say that in part because you're right, James, we spent a lot of time last year with 350. Many of us spent a lot of time trying to figure out who we need to talk to, how much. And it was really difficult to try to figure out when you're even having conversations with the legislature, how to have these conversations, because there's so much influence that's occurring on a daily basis. It's almost impossible to distill who's making the decision. So I offer that as a.
Yeah, what I ended up hearing was not that opposition groups were an issue for us. It's complexity is the big issue for us. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Thank you. And I really appreciate hearing this. I think everybody's kind of come to where we work through that, but I think the big process is the timeline piece too. When we talk about could we do the legislation? Is it possible? Is it possible? But do we have the time to do it? And then is our goal going to be changed? Our greenhouse gas goal going to be changed as we're in the middle of doing it? So I think that's part of why we've gone there. And clearly I have to end on something. How about those apples?
That's good. Yes.
Chair Villagrosa, 2 questions. Chris, how many new legislators will there be next year?
Oh gosh, I think there's 10 new senators and something like 20 to 30 new assembly members. I should know off the top of my head, but there's quite a, and I think the other potential changes, leadership changes. Senator McGuire's termed out. A whole new crop of senators. Who's going to be in the committee chairs? We know that the current housing chair won't be there because she's termed out. So there's a lot of unknowns just from the churn there.
And I may have missed this, and I apologize, but the stakeholders, especially, and I appreciate you working with the North State Building Industry Association. What option would they, between 1 and 2, where would they be?
I'm not certain. We haven't discussed that directly. I know how they reacted to the proposed amendment from HCD last year, but again, not sure if that would apply in the future. But we could certainly reach out to them if.
Great. And Supervisor Desmond has a prepared statement from me.
Director Haudesheld wanted me to thank staff for really peeling back the complexities and getting to the core of the matter.
Getting to the core. Oh my.
Excuse me.
Yes. Director Branscombe.
Thank you. To the extent the greenhouse gas target is driving all this, a significant portion, in fact, most of this country's industrial activity was offshore in the last 30 plus years. It's coming back right now. And more of it, and particularly if you believe this fellow who I follow, Peter Zion, believes most of it will be coming back. And it's going to put pressure on greenhouse gas targets because all that additional industrial activity, and I don't know how much of it's going to be in California, will require a lot more electricity. And the green options are not enough to cover the requirements. So I think everybody's going to be in the same boat. Everybody's going to have a lot of pressure and have a struggle meeting these targets. And there's going to be macro policy concerns that may help us in relaxing those requirements.
I agree, Director Branscombe. Yes.
If I might follow up in a similar direction to that, I'm just curious, the Chevron decision, what impacts is that going to have on CARB's rulemaking authority?
I would defer to council on that, but I don't know. Gosh, it's complicated because the intersection between the EPA rule allowing the different standards in California. So I think generally it doesn't affect the state's regulatory authority all that much, but CARB might be a special case because of the unique relationship there. And so I would not hazard a guess.
Yeah, and I would just say I don't think it would really impact CARB just because it's a state agency. The Chevron deference is a federal standard, or was a federal standard, I should say. So it really wouldn't at least directly affect CARB as a state agency. It could affect the EPA and other federal agencies, and some of those requirements get passed through. But even there, it affects the way their decisions are reviewed, not necessarily the way they're adopted. So I wouldn't see it having too much effect here, but it's definitely something we keep an eye on and see how it passes through.
Yeah, I mean, Director Joyner, I'm not an attorney, but I play a pretty good one. And I think potentially down the line, you may see some, I mean, if CARB continues to be the tail that wags the dog from a national perspective, I could see somebody potentially coming forward to, whether that's, miles or, mandates that are pushing cars in one direction or not in terms of reduction in internal combustion engines. So there could be some stuff there. I don't think it's going to hit the timeline that we're under for next year in order to get a bill through. And we do think, and just again, I know we touched on this a little bit, but 2025 really is the more optimal year to get a bill in and done. It's a non-election year. It's the first year of a 2-year cycle, so it does actually give us 2 years if we run into trouble that first year. But much better chance. We're also talking about a change in governorship and other things, going in 2026. So the political landscape will be a lot different at that point. So we do think it's optimal next year to get something done. But I do think we'll see things in the future.
And Chair, one other thing I'll clarify is that the old Chevron deference standard for federal was applied more deference than what we see under state law. So getting rid of that standard kind of brings the federal law or federal jurisprudence and state jurisprudence more closer aligned.
Great. Any other questions or comments? This is great. I mean, and as we said, this is coming back to us in October for a vote. So it gives us time to mull this over, think about it. You've heard from a few of us that have maybe a little bit better sense of where we think we might want to go, but certainly want everybody to have that ability to weigh in, ask questions. I'll volunteer some of us that have said things. So Jill or Alice, myself, Oscar, that have been in on some of these meetings. If you want to call us and just talk through it, if you have questions, please do. I know staff will do the same, but we really want to make sure when we come back in October that we can pick a path to go down, feel good about it, or at least as good as we can. I know here in El Dorado County, we don't really do sausage making, but we do a lot of applesauce making. And I think we did a little bit of that here today. So really appreciate the conversation. But again, if anyone has any other comments for Chris or for staff, please bring them forward.
Chair Saragosa, we do have a member of the public with their hand raised. Would you like to take that comment now?
Absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Mr. Tartagia, you are live if you'd like to make your comment now.
Thank you. Appreciate the insight and the information through there. And a number of things I appreciate already being noted about how the legislative change. The one thing I was not able to pick up on is the current housing situation. Where is it in this 8-year cycle? Is it 4 years in? You know, I know you talk about 2027 as a kind of a pushback, but I didn't get the inference about how that was affecting housing, you know, and where the pushback last year related to housing. That's just my related comment of understanding. And somebody can explain it to me later if needed.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other public comments?
There's no other public comment.
I don't know if Chris or James, if anyone wanted to, or Christina, anyone wanted to just briefly touch on where RENA falls into the plan right now. I know it's sort of a moving target, so.
I may have missed the full question, but how does RENA fit into the plan?
I was looking for where
are we, Clint, in the 8-year cycle?
We would, your housing elements, which kind of conclude the RENA cycle, would right now be due in 2029, the year that we would adopt the next plan if we did the 4-year cycle. That makes it a little bit challenging. We'd have to kind of rethink how we approach the housing needs allocation process at the regional level. But right now they would be due in 2029.
And Clint, can you also just while we're on this topic, just give board members a heads up when we would begin, if the current RENA cycle stays the same, when would we begin in earnest this next RENA cycle?
Most likely at the regional level, we would start weighing in 2027. We would want to weigh in with HCD on what the kind of the total determination could be. That's the total number that comes to the region, and then begin going through all of the different options that we have for making adjustments to the income factors that you kind of have to decide on to figure out which jurisdictions get how much of what kind of income bracket or affordable, very low income household. That would probably start in 2027. We might do some internal work in 26. It'd come to you beginning in 27.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we close this item? All right, seeing none, thank you, everybody. Chris, thank you for driving up and being here with us to walk us through the PowerPoint. So more to come. Again, this will be back in October, and please reach out if you have questions, concerns. We want to make sure everybody is really knows as much as possible so that we can make a really informed decision in that October meeting. So thank you, everybody. Okay. I gotta keep my finger on this thing. Item 14, which is our funding round working group report out. And Director Thomas has this for us.
All right, thank you. It's hard to believe that the board working group held its final meeting in August. It was an amazing process, but our August meeting focused on the review of the framework that, if you remember, was being approved at the August Transportation Committee meeting as well as our board meeting. And we talked about how those will shape the more robust set of guidelines that we'll be acting on in October. During our August meeting, staff and board members reviewed the feedback. And then we had a really healthy and robust brainstorming session where we talked about strategies for what we need to incorporate into the system preservation program. And that was the common thread across all of our jurisdictions. While we are a wide and diverse, wide and diverse region, we all need to maintain our roads, no matter who we are. And we also talked about the farm to market roads and agritourism roads. I shouldn't get hung up on that one. We talked about that today. As a reminder, the System Preservation Program is focused on the maintenance of our region's most important roadways, and we recognize that as an agricultural region, those ag roads are also critically important in how we prioritize them within our framework, because it's not all apples to oranges, if you will, or it's more apples to oranges rather than apples to apples. For example, this was a very interesting discussion. If we talk about having a program to identify farm to market roads. So those in Yolo County, Yuba, where you're taking produce in, taking freight from farms to market. Those are certain types of roads that need to be prioritized. But here in El Dorado County, we import people. And those of you that went on the bus tour today, we don't export our produce in large freight containers. We import people to experience the farms and buy them there. And so it's very different. And so we need to have a different set of guidelines that also is applicable for that. As you probably saw our road network up in the Apple Hill region is not all that robust and needs a preservation program, if you will. We also talked about equity, and we're going to be talking about that more in the workshop that's upcoming, but how this will play into a system preservation program, once again, recognizing that we are a diverse region. And this was a really great conversation as well. I love that our framework is going to give each jurisdiction or agency the ability to define what equity looks like for them, because that is it's very different for all of us, and how the projects that we are bringing forward for funding considerations will help solve the equity challenges that are unique to each of us. We also discussed the next steps over the next year. So while the guidelines will be wrapped up this October, it's hard to believe that's next month, there will be key decision points. For example, what will be our timeline on this funding? We will look at how we are aligning with federal and state funding, and we're going to have to decide, do we go out for funding, the first year, or do we take a year off and not have any funding available and have a larger pot available so we can all have more meaningful projects when the funding round comes around? So we will be having those really key discussions later. Just to reflect on this, I'd like to thank each and every member of the board working group for their intentional efforts. They were great discussions, a really, I thought effective process. Everyone did a wonderful job participating and bringing their insights into this process. I'd like to acknowledge our SACOG staff. My goodness, Christina and everyone did an amazing job in walking us through, once again, a very productive process in alignment with our staff working group, which was chaired by Woody Deloria. And they really are the working professionals where the rubber meets the road. And their insights were key in giving the board working group important considerations. So once again, it was an amazing process. I thought very, very productive. And I also appreciated that everyone that showed up at this, no one was driving an agenda.
Thank you, Director Thomas. And again, can we give a round of applause to our working group and our staff working group? Thank you. Any questions for Director Thomas? All right, seeing none.
Mr. Zaragoza?
Yes,
We have a member of the public with their hand raised. Would you like to take that comment now?
I would. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tartagia,
Sorry.
you're live in the meeting if you'd like to make your comment now.
Right. It was just the comment that we lost the communication of listening off the hearing what was said.
Jeffrey, you're in the meeting if you'd like to make your comment now.
You can hear me or you can't?
Jeffrey, do you still have a comment?
I'm trying, but it's not working. There we go. My comment was I lost everything through there. Your voice did not come through. So you restarted it. I'm hearing you and listening, but that was my comment, was effectively that I couldn't hear something happen, microphone off or whatever. Didn't work on the last in there, but I'll pick it up on the YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that feedback as we try to work through streaming as we, go into other locations. So it is a work in progress, and apologize to the public if we're not catching what everyone says. So we will eventually get this right. So appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to move on to our workshop, which is item 15, around emergency preparedness and evacuation planning. And Woody Deloria from EDCTC is going to be leading this, and then Wendy and I both will have some comments in this presentation as well.
Okay. So I will start us off today. Once again, just a warm welcome to El Dorado County and Placerville. We are delighted to welcome SACOG. I want to thank the city of Placerville for hosting us here at Town Hall. Did a beautiful job. And then our SACOG staff, you are masters at setting this up. This is incredible. Thank you for all the hard work. Also like to help yourself to goodies over there. We have produce from the Apple Hill region with little baggies. So that's for all of you to grab some produce and take it home for you to enjoy. So please do that, both board members and SACOG staff and everyone here. All right, so let's, sorry, I am in charge of the next slide. So here's just a very brief introduction to El Dorado County if you don't know our history. So, oops. Where am I pointing? There we go. All right. So we'll look. There we go. Good help's hard to find. I'll look back. A lot of you probably know our history, but it is significant, I think, to have a brief look back. We are the traditional homeland of the Nisenan, the Maidu, Miwok, and Washoe tribes. Equally significant is we have an important place in America's story. As you all know, we are the seat of the California Gold Rush. In 1839, a German-born Swiss businessman named Johann August Sutter founded a settlement at the confluence of the American River and the Sacramento River after obtaining a land grant from the Mexican governor. In 1840, the settlers began arriving. In 1846, Sutter contracted with James Marshall to establish a sawmill as a purpose of creating lumber to build the region out for the settlers that were arriving. You know the story. In 1848, flakes of gold were discovered, which sparked the largest mass migration in U.S. history, which was obviously known as the California Gold Rush. When California became a state in 1850, El Dorado County was one of the original counties. Known as the heart of the mother lode, our name, the Gilded One, reflects our affluent origins and our golden past. I'm also particularly proud of this as my family arrived in Placerville in 1850. We came across the plains from Illinois in covered wagons, and we settled here. I like to say we sold the gold pans rather than used them, which worked out a little better, but we've been merchants since the gold rush. I also love that my great-great-grandfather was the El Dorado County Sheriff from 1898 to 1906. He was also the tax collector at the same time, which probably made tax collecting a little easier. So I'm not going to throw any stones, but I also love that I had another great-great-grandfather was a Placerville City Councilman around the same time. So our origins are deep, and I think that stems from my deep love for this county. So let's talk about the golds of today. The golds of today is that we are a beautiful and compelling place. We are home to over 200,000 residents that span over 1,700 square miles, and a large part of our land is consumed by the El Dorado National Forest. So we're also a very, very complex place. As we talked about today, in the Apple Hill region alone, we have over 1.3 million visitors that visit the region that you visited this morning. And I want to thank each and every one of you that got up real early to join us on the bus tour. As I said, that region alone has an economic impact to El Dorado County of over $353 million. We are also California's playground, El Dorado County, the El Dorado National Forest. And that is significant. We did a Beta Basin Bay to Tahoe Basin Recreational and Tourism Study in 2014 through the El Dorado County Transportation Commission. And in 2014, we found that over 4 million visitors make close to 8 million trips a year into our region. And that's significant when we talk about transportation and when we talk about what kinds of amenities we need to have in order to serve those visitors. What's also, I think, important is that rural California is often overlooked in state policy. And yet what folks need to understand that while California comes and utilizes El Dorado County, they need us to thrive. You need to have our hometowns flourishing so we can have unique and interesting places for folks to visit. We need to have policies that allow our residents to have fire insurance so they can afford to live here, so they can offer Airbnbs and they can host you, and we can have workers that handle our river rafting and create all the amazing experiences that you come to enjoy. So California needs rural California to thrive, and that's really important to understand. It's challenging, like I said, being a large county with a small population. And we have a large influx of visitors utilizing our road network, and there's never enough money to sustain it. But I'm very excited about our road payments preservation system that SACOG will be embarking on. And as a rural California county, we've had to get creative with some really difficult challenges. And I'm very excited to have Woody walk you through that, some of those creative innovations that we are very, very proud of. So in closing, what is our vision for El Dorado County? Our vision is that we are a county that has an exceptional quality of life with a strong sense of community, rural character, managed growth, and opportunity for all. And we're delighted to welcome you here today. And with this, I'll turn it over to Michael. Tell us about Placerville.
Thank you. Do I got to hold this? I'm on, right? You hear me? All right, great. All right. So yes, welcome to Placerville. And really, Wendy covered, I think, most of this, but there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight for what I call like the donut within the greater El Dorado County, which is the city of Placerville. As some of you know, there's only two cities in El Dorado County, South Lake Tahoe and the city of Placerville. So for Western Slope, city of Placerville is really it. Everything else is unincorporated area. So we have a unique relationship with the county, a very close relationship with the county, since we're the county seat. So we get a chance to work side by side with them really every day. So the beginnings, 1848 to 1854, originally called Dry Diggins, and then Old Hangtown, and then Placerville. And as Director Thomas mentioned, around the same time, 1850, California is becoming a state. Gold is being discovered here in Placerville, and we are now the third biggest city in California. There is sort of the maybe delusions of grandeur that Placerville will become, or at the time, Old Hangtown will become the capital of California. And so there was an effort underfoot in realizing that Old Hangtown might not be the name that you would want for the capital of California. And so even back in the 1850s, we realized that name probably wasn't going to be putting the best foot forward for our city. Placerville is born, and it's the name that we have until today. Old Hangtown still hangs around as sort of a colloquial term, and you'll see it on different things, but really, even back in the 1850s, they knew that the name had to change. So go to the next slide here. Placerville today. So again, as I said, we're the county seat. It's an interesting area because we go, as I mentioned earlier, where we have about 11,000 residents here, but we grow to over 30,000 during the day. And that is because the workforce really is here. We are a working city. I know a lot of people take in Placerville as a tourist town, and it is. People come here to see Main Street and some of the historical buildings. They go to the mine, but really this is a working city. And that drives our economy, that drives our local economy. tourism is great, but without the people that live and work here, we'd have a real struggle. So move right on. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so our mission, a unique historical past forging into a golden future. And that's really how we think about Placerville, is maintaining our historical assets, ensuring that future generations have the ability to enjoy them, to see them, to learn our history. But at the same time, because we are a working town, we're a town that, you know, doesn't create as much VMT as I thought we would do. When I first saw those heat maps come out and saw that Placerville actually was doing pretty good. And that's because a lot of our folks that live here stay here and work here. I'm one of those creating VMT because my office is down in Sacramento, but a lot of it is here. And we want to continue to have that. We want to continue to have affordable housing so that future generations can live here, don't have to look for other opportunities to work, whether down the hill or in other areas of California altogether. I lost one.
I don't know where that other slide was. It was supposed to be there.
It's gone. This slide was very important. No, so that's that slide here. Let me go to this last, we go over to Woody's information here. So I'll leave it here. No, that slide basically just provided some numbers in terms of the budget for Placerville. So we have about $11 million plus general fund budget, about $24 million altogether with special funds. I always say we're the little city that could. We have our own wastewater treatment center. We have our own police department. We do contract for fire services, but we do a lot of our work in-house for a small city. And so I think we punch, you know, really above our weight for what we do, and it gives us a seat at a table in a way that I think for smaller cities maybe they wouldn't be able to. But then sometimes we also have to step back and say, hey, we're a microscopic city in the greater scheme of things, but we're really proud of the work that our staff does every day for the residents and for the visitors and the business owners in the city of Placerville. You know, we have some unique challenges in terms of you know, I think with some of the economic changes, we feel the pressure from down the hill a little bit because we're so close. You can have workers that go down the hill as well for some of our service industry folks. So those are things that we're going to have to look at and see what we can do to help keep, you know, the vibrancy of those local, like we're going to go to after this, those local restaurants and businesses open and thriving here. So some things that we want to work on as a council and as an area as we move forward. And again, just want to thank and welcome all of you here to the city of Placerville. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Woody.
All right, thank you, Chair Saragosa. Good morning, board members. I am Woody Deloria. I'm the Executive Director of the El Dorado County Transportation Commission, and I'm glad I haven't heard an apple pun for at least 5 minutes. That said, I think, I mean no insult to anyone's intelligence here, but I think often our Sacramento partners wonder who this agency, EDCTC, is up here in El Dorado County, who we are, what we do. So I'll just give you an overview. For many, it's just a refresher. You know, EDCTC was established in 1975 as one of the 3 regional transportation planning agencies in the 6-county SACOG region. We have essentially the same duty as Placer County Transportation Planning Agency and SACOG as the RTPA for the 4 counties in the Sacramento area. We are a small but mighty office of 2 senior planners, myself, and 2 admin staff. So we you know, have a great partnership with SACOG. We rely on SACOG for all the greenhouse gas conformity analysis, developing the MTP SES as the federally recognized MPO. And very much appreciate the strong collaboration and coordination with SACOG that we've developed over the last few years. Just a quick personal story. My first week of employment with El Dorado County was in 2003 with the first blueprint, and I was directed to go down to SACOG to attend a meeting and showed up, and all of El Dorado County was grayed out in a blueprint map. So we have come a long ways as far as partnership and coordination. We are certainly now included in that and very much appreciate that. So let's get to. So as the regional transportation planning agency, we often look ahead to investments that improve the quality of life, commerce, and safety of our communities. However, given the limited availability of funding, we, as all of you know very, very well, we have an extensive backlog of transportation investment needs. This is especially true in the outlying portions of the region, the rural portions of the region, where you have extensive interregional tourism and recreation traffic. And that traffic is using our rural state highway system to access all of the open space, the Tahoe Basin, all of the agritourism activities that you saw some of today. So given that the funding that we receive is based on our resident population and the number of lane miles that we maintain that Supervisor Thomas mentioned earlier, it is very challenging to plan for and deliver large projects to support that interregional traffic. And as Supervisor Thomas mentioned, in 2014, we received a Caltrans planning grant to look at the Beta Tahoe Basin Tourism and Recreation Travel Impact Study. And that allowed us to, for the first time, parse out that interregional tourism traffic versus the commuter traffic. And we looked at peak volumes during peak visitation, and we saw that more than 70% of the traffic on Highway 50 right here to our north was tourist traffic during those peak visitation periods, and 60% during just midweek normal traffic periods. So significantly more traffic than our resident population using that system. Okay. And since 2014, we've certainly seen an increase in visitation. Those challenges present themselves on Highway 50, as all of you know who come up to Apple Hill during peak visitation periods. We actually saw a significant spike in visitation during the coronavirus pandemic. Actually, El Dorado County hit its highest population in 2021 during that pandemic. It's since decreased slightly, but we did have an extensive visitation increase, and I think a lot of folks became aware of areas and now continue to frequent those areas. So we're seeing a lot of visitation continue. With those challenges, we also face a lot of mortgage migrants moving from the Bay Area for lower cost of living, higher quality of life, and with that comes new transportation challenges, such as a demand for more transit, more mobility options, and things of that nature. So, given the limited funding that we have and these new challenges and emerging challenges, it certainly is a uphill climb. Well, as we move forward addressing a lot of these transportation issues and opportunities, we are also committed to those most at risk and vulnerable, which is why we fully embrace the great work that your board has directed SACOG to do with the race equity and inclusion work. And with as diverse a region as we have, our focus on equity here in El Dorado County might look very different than it does down in the urban core of Sacramento. We don't have those geographically defined, underserved, disadvantaged areas that are due to past planning and policy. Instead, we see more of the isolated, often low-income residents, elderly residents with limited or no mobility options and limited access. Often these residents are in those rural foothill communities where those low housing costs afforded them the ability to purchase a home, raise their families, and now age in place. And the severity of essentially here in El Dorado County, the wildfire risk, the limited accessibility and the mobility challenges now place these folks at a much higher risk, demanding a really meaningful concerted effort toward making improvements. So one of the most recent efforts that we've taken on, looking deeper into the issues of the interregional tourism traffic and evacuation preparedness, is a concept that, I'll be completely honest, we threw out to our partners as somewhat of a harebrained idea. And it grew legs pretty quickly and is now a project that's moving forward. That's what we call Trip to Green. New system. This is a brand new system in Town Hall. So right here. Oh, yep. Thank you. So Trip to Green was formalized through yet again another Caltrans planning grant that funded this effort, the US 50 Corridor Action Plan that the commission just adopted in May of last year. The effort looked at a section of Highway 50, again, just to our north, here through downtown Placerville at the three at-grade signalized intersections of Canal Street, Spring Street, and Bedford Street. Again, if you've ever come up to Apple Hill to go skiing, to go to Tahoe during those peak visitation weekends or periods, you've experienced those signals and have been in some degree of delay for sure. Many years ago, Caltrans actually proposed to the city of Placerville, Nevada County, a full flyover, elevated flyover, 4 lanes, massive concrete structure. Just visualize that when you walk outside to the north here. The community at that time declined that offer, and that's why we have these 3 lovely at-grade signalized intersections today. Now we're facing new challenges with the advent of Google and Waze directing folks around the 3 signals. So we have traffic being diverted onto local neighborhood streets, which is unsafe and just an undesirable condition for our residents here in Placerville. And there actually now is a desire by the public, by stakeholders, the local business community, and elected officials to really remedy this and come up with some solutions for those 3 at-grade signalized intersections. So as a transportation planning agency, what do? We study this again. This time we actually look back at looking back at some of the initial proposals that Caltrans came up with decades ago. This one being this elevated express lane concept. We revisited the cost estimates on this. We looked at essentially tolling it, which we estimated generating about $33.5 million by 2045. But with a $300 million project delivery cost, that's a pretty big nut to crack for a small rural agency, city, and county as well. So given that, we looked at some new innovative solutions. And that is this trip to green concept. So this second scenario within our study looks at this trip to green, which essentially would install automated traffic barriers. They could be simple crossing arms. They could be pneumatic or hydraulic bollards that come up out of the roadway. If you've gone to DC or the Capitol, you see these types of traffic control devices. And this would allow for the 3 signals in Placerville to be held in a static green phase for those predetermined periods. So essentially converting Highway 50 through Placerville into a free-flowing expressway, allowing for that traffic to continue on. Now, you would certainly have the ability for emergency vehicles to preempt those signals, and you would allow for some additional or some existing left turns in and out onto 50. So they wouldn't be completely shut off, but all of the cross access would be closed. All of the right turns in and out would be closed. We'd add for additional bike and pedestrian crossing by constructing a new overcrossing right here, just to our east. And this cost of the trip to green concept is estimated at around 16 million. So significantly less than that $300+ million flyover. Not to mention the visual impact of a massive, concrete structure going through the historic town of Placerville. So as an element of this study, we looked at we planned for a proof of concept or a pilot project to be rolled out in the fall of 2021. The final traffic control plan wasn't yet finished on August 14th of 2021. That's the first day that the Caldor fire was cited in southern El Dorado County. It was actually completed the next day by the city engineer, Rebecca Neves, who the city of Folsom has since stolen from us, and we miss dearly. But Rebecca finished that up on the 15th and submitted that to all of the partner agencies, realizing that everything was in order and that we were prepared for a traffic management rollout of Trip to Green. On August 17th, the city of Placerville police chief called the city engineer and essentially asked if we could roll out that Trip to Green pilot for the evacuation of Pollock Pines, Camino, and other residents east of Placerville. Later that day on the 17th, Everything was operational in place, and they evacuated more than 7,000 folks from the Caldor fire using a traffic management plan that was for a pilot project for interregional tourism traffic. So I'll even go as far as to say that I told my board when we got this grant, this is not an evacuation project. I couldn't have been more wrong. And I'm glad, because it worked very well and it evacuated those 7,000 folks very quickly from Pollock Pines. And I know there's anecdotes from constituents that have said that when they were terrified that they were going to be stuck in, from Camino to Placerville on Highway 50 because of those signals. And when they saw that those lights were green, they felt that they're in a safe place. Given the length of time of the Caldor fire and just the angst and the stress placed on our residents, we obviously decided to push the actual Trip to Green pilot until the next fall. Personal note, this is a photograph. I don't know if you can see it well. That is a pyrocumulus cloud that is directly above my garage. So during the Caldor fire. So in 2022, we did roll out the pilot for Trip to Green. We had 3 weekends, one each in August, September, and October. The pilot ran Saturday to Sunday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Labor Day weekend, it also ran Monday. We, because we didn't have an evacuation or a fire event, we were able to actually analyze and study the success of this pilot. And here you can see, it's kind of hard to see, maybe closer up, but on the photograph on the left is the weekend before the pilot on Highway 50. Traffic's backed up to, I don't know, could be point view. I don't know. I can't see it around the corner there, but significant backup on Highway 50 westbound. And you'll also notice on Main Street, which is just to the right or the south of Highway 50, there's a lot of traffic on Main Street. And that's not parked cars frequenting our businesses. That's people trying to think they're smarter than the system and go around and then clog up our local streets. Conversely, on the right, you have the Trip to Green pilot, same time, the following weekend. Highway 50 is clear and Main Street has parked cars in those parking spaces, hopefully buying, things on Main Street if possible. So now we're moving forward essentially with that ultimate Trip to Green implementation. We recently received a $3 million grant from the local transportation climate adaptation program to develop project approval and environmental documentation. And we'll be advocating for delivery funds or construction funds once that phase is complete. So we are going to be going through a full process to design environmentally clear, secure right of way for installation of some type of traffic control devices that they might not even, this will take some time. There may be some new technology that comes up that's available that we're not even aware of yet. But that's I would say probably the commission and the city's top priority project at this point. And, given the challenges that we face at the policy level at the state with constructing new roads, in this case, if the elevated flyover was the preferred alternative, it would be incredibly challenging to get support for that, let alone the $300+ million to deliver it. And so I think, maximizing the existing system that we have with this lower cost, high impact solution is really the best way to go for us at this point. So that's the Trip to Green in concept. Any questions on that before I talk about the wildfire evacuation plan?
Quick question, please. So you are allowing a greater flow on 50 at the expense of cross traffic. But that keeps the cars from doing the cut through traffic on residential and other streets. So that trade-off, how are the local folks feeling about that trade-off?
I think it was well received during the pilot. Of course, there were concerns by some of the businesses that they would lose visitation on Main Street. We had an extensive detour mapping, online. We pushed that out online. We sent mailers. It's also posted on the actual local roads, which, your typical detour signs. We'd hope to be able to kind of modernize that in some way with more technology and maybe develop some kind of an app. But I will say, right now, residents in Placerville or even someone like myself who lives in South County, we don't go downtown during those peak periods. We already have our own detour routes that we take, right? If I need to go to Home Depot, there's no way I'm going on a Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon. So we've grown accustomed to that travel pattern. It will take time for us to become accustomed to some new patterns, especially if when this is implemented. I will say, years ago, the city of Placerville business owners were concerned about that same thing of having a flyover that would just all of their business would just bypass the city. We don't have that same situation because we do still have those left in, left out access points. We do have detours. There will be signage far east of Placerville to show folks how to get off on the main street. So we hope to eliminate the need of having 3 signals be part of your business model in downtown, and have more information available for folks to access that.
I was thinking about folks who live on the north side of the highway.
I can actually answer that because I live there. So it was probably, for all of us that live there and know how to move around on the back streets, I tested it out when we did this multiple times. It took me probably an extra 2 to 3 minutes to get from my side of town to the other side if I wanted to. And then if I wanted to get on Highway 50, I just had to I take this road a lot, like to go to Home Depot or some other way. So it wasn't a huge inconvenience. If you didn't know about it, we did a lot of advertising, but if you didn't know about it and you drove down and you had to make like a U-turn to go back a different direction, I got some emails from constituents that were grumpy about that. But I think for the most part, people figured it out pretty quickly because you also weren't getting inundated with the traffic that was usually clogging all those streets up, the local streets, with people trying to cut through to save a minute or so. So it was a slight inconvenience for us that were residents, but it also opened up the streets that we would normally ignore, like Woody said.
Hey, Woody, if I could just want to add on here. This is not just a project that can work in Placerville and nowhere else. So when we're talking about transportation and how we're going to afford all the sort of wider roads and new capacity, and we say, we got to think smarter and leaner and quicker and more nimbler. This is exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. So Director Teeter, downtown Wheatland, right? And 65. I think many of your jurisdictions have challenges like this that through ITS operations, and not only is it that much cheaper, but it's that much quicker to deliver, right? I mean, you talked about the cost of flyover, but that is more than a decade, right, away. So thanks.
And it can be applied not only this kind of tourism and recreation traffic impacts, but also evacuations, as we'll talk about now. So we've also recently completed this Greater Placerville Wildfire Evacuation Preparedness Study. That was also funded through a Caltrans Transportation Planning Grant. We received $275,000. So thank you to Caltrans for that funding. We received notice of funding award in June of 2021. Again, Caldor started August 14th of 21. So we applied for this project before the Caldor fire. In the face of all the rising threat of wildfire, especially post-Camp Fire, we recognize that need to look at evacuation preparedness and integrated that into our transportation planning. We had a really good working relationship with Jody Jones, who is the mayor of Paradise during the Camp Fire, former District 3 director, Caltrans, and so we had a good relationship with her, and she helped point us in the right direction. Now, I want to be clear about one thing, and that is this is not an evacuation plan. So this is an evacuation preparedness plan that is focused on making the transportation network more resilient and adaptive to climate change and to these wildfire events. In the event of an evacuation, and it is slightly different in the Sacramento River Valley, where you have predetermined evacuation routes to help you get away from the water and to higher ground. And in these foothill communities, OES, CAL FIRE, and Sheriff will be the ones that tell you in a real-time situation where to go and what those evacuation routes are. So this project area was the Greater Placerville area, 87,000 acres, basically from Fresh Pond in the east to the El Dorado interchange to the west. It was bounded by the north by the South Fork of the American River and the south by Slide Park Road, E16, and Pleasant Valley Road. We looked at all of the vulnerable populations, so zero car households, mobility challenged, seniors, disabled, and otherwise remote or disconnected folks. Ultimately, we came up with a list of projects to improve the operations of the existing system at intersections, and then when those evacuations are in play, to really get the public out and get the firefighters in. And before Caldor, we submitted this application, as I mentioned. We had a less than impressive list of partner agencies that wanted to be involved. After Caldor Fire, we had an extensive list of collaborators and partners with an incredibly strong presence by the fire response community, CHP, CAL FIRE, Cal OES, and El Dorado County OES. Public engagement was a critical component of this. We had extensive engagement through those both traditional in-person meetings, but also interactive tools such as the social pinpoint platform allow people to geolocate some comments and ideas and share those with the team. We also met with all of the fire safe councils as well as lots of other elected committees and boards. Seemingly a silly question, why do this work now? Well, I think it's obvious. Threat of wildfire grows every year. We've had 8 of the largest 20 wildfires in the state of California since 2020. So it's in the last 4 years, 8 of the largest 20 fires have burned. In 21, I mentioned the Caldor fire burned more than 220,000 acres. It closed 3 major highways, 50, 88, and 89, and destroyed more than 1,000 structures in the entire community of Grizzly Flats. And not to make this too personal, but I will just share that this is the bottom right map is the Caldor burn scar, and kind of looks like a mouth there on the western end. My house is actually right inside that top right corner of that mouth. So my family and I were evacuated for 27 days with 6 horses, 3 dogs. We lived at the Amador County Fairgrounds with thousands and thousands of livestock. I mean, chickens, ducks, geese. You think of it, they were there. It's not something I wish on anyone, but it really is a reality for all of us now here in the foothill communities. So we considered all the roads in the study area, even those small neighborhood routes, for performance during the evacuation. We also identified any kind of one lane bridges, signal controlled intersections or other traffic devices. We looked at both the weekend traffic, so the ag tourism weekends, the peak visitation weekends, as well as the typical work commute traffic. And I can give you a link to the actual document, so if you're interested, you can go through this in more detail. But then we worked with the local fire, forestry, traffic, and emergency services to identify 4 wildfire and evacuation scenarios to analyze the function of the roadway network during that evacuation. We worked as a virtual incident command center with the sheriff's OES, CAL FIRE, and County Fire, and developed fire scenario parameters and evacuation scenario parameters for each of the scenarios. They also provided key evacuation order details such as road closures and access restrictions and how the order parameters may influence specific evacuation routes for each fire. Ultimately, the wildfire parameters and evacuation order parameters served as the inputs for the modeling for the wildfire scenarios. I'm losing folks, so I'm trying to get through to the good stuff. All right. So here's an example of what those wildfire parameters and evacuation parameters look like when we included them as inputs to the model. In this scenario, you have the Chili Bar fire scenario that reaches, essentially, it starts at the confluence of the American River and State Route 193, just north of here, about 2 miles as the crow flies. It's burning southeast towards the city of Placerville. A pretty high rate of spread. It's in fall, 3 a.m. The fire reaches the city limits in 1 hour. This is, of course, a terrifying scenario. It's the one that those of us who live here have thought about many, many times. The Chili Bar area is a highly visited recreation area, camping, cookout, cooking outside, all sorts of things that are of concern. So building on the wildfire parameters and the evacuation order parameters, each scenario is then assessed for the traffic evacuation using a simulation-based dynamic traffic assignment model to account for those dynamics associated with the wildfire evacuation. And this was built off of a traditional travel demand model that looks at development impacts to the transportation system, but was specifically designed for wildfire evacuation. First one in the state of California to be done that way. So. So the model included all of the streets in the system and accounted for any kind of constraints such as the stop signs or signals or narrow, winding, slow traffic routes. The model assigned traffic in 15-minute time intervals based on the departure time distribution of the evacuees heading to those specific designated spots by the OES. The four scenarios were developed as worst case, meaning that the traffic the traffic in the network was as high as it could be, because those scenarios in those situations are so dynamic. It may be a peak visitation weekend. It depends on the time of day, the time of year, the season, and all of that. So we had to look at those kind of worst case scenarios. Each scenario is modeled under two conditions. First being just your typical road capacity, normal day with normal traffic, and then road capacity reduced by 40% due to the emergency conditions. So smoke in the air, emergency vehicles, all of that. Modeling each scenario really identified those critical evacuation routes and congestion bottlenecks along those routes, which is important. Identifying those bottlenecks allowed the team to develop those recommendations for operational improvements and infrastructure projects to help facilitate evacuation and or reduce those the number of emergency service resources needed to help in an evacuation. So we identified 38 projects to better facilitate the evacuation events in the greater Placerville area, many of which can be scalable to other parts of El Dorado County or other parts of the region. Other operational improvements included developing evacuation-specific signal timing that can be remotely activated, or providing actual emergency resources, boots on the ground, to manually flag traffic through an intersection. You can't see all those projects, but it is a suite of projects that we are now going to be compiling into our advocacy platforms and going after funding for, likely the next SACOG funding round. I expect to see some of these projects as well. As we already know, the Trip to Green effort is really effective when that primary westbound evacuation occurs. Again, technology is fundamental. The ITS equipment that at critical bottlenecks allows real-time traffic information that's needed to allocate those resources effectively. A signal pole with a cabinet, a camera, radar, and weather can really help inform what the traffic conditions are at those key intersections. We've also included a plan to look at what's called an evacuation lane, which would be an additional westbound lane on Highway 50 from Placerville West. It would not be a VMT-inducing lane. It would not be a general purpose lane. It would just be used for those conditions when a westbound evacuation occurs. These are in place in other states for tornadoes and other evacuation events. So now we're moving forward with prioritizing these projects and integrating those into our long-term regional transportation plan. And again, we'll be packaging these up for a suite of federal and state advocacy platform efforts in the next few years. So that's all my slides. So this really isn't the type of work that I ever thought I'd be involved with. As when I started out as a transportation planner, it was always streets, roads, bike peds, and transit. But it is now clearly integrated in everything that we do. We are a foothill community that it is at the highest level risk according to all of the metrics for wildfire. The irony that flood and wildfire are the two biggest, two of the biggest, if not the biggest threats to our region, is not lost on me. I think there's great opportunities to leverage that. The county has made it clear, El Dorado County has made it clear with the addition of the OWOPR, Office of Wildfire Preparedness and Resiliency, OWOPR office, under the leadership of Supervisor Thomas and others. And I think, it's definitely going to, as I mentioned, going to be part of everything that we do. And I'm happy to share that work with you today. So be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Woody, real quick, have you shared this with the Cal Fire Chiefs or other organizations? Because I think we got a fire along a creek. So they were in a mountain foothills community. 4th of July, some Yahoo lit up our open space and threatened. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So Cal Fire was integral in development of this study. Initially, when we started out with this, we thought we were going to be leading this effort. Caldor Fire happened the fire response community got involved, and we essentially facilitated it, and they led this effort. So they're certainly aware of it. We've also shared it with our Resource Conservation District, who's using this work and the modeling and the mapping to develop their grant applications, and they've actually received millions and millions of dollars to do some of their fuels reduction work based on the study. And El Dorado County is actually using it in their emergency management plan for the fire, the evacuation preparedness element of that plan. So we just adopted this last May, and it's already starting to see implementation today. So it's great. Anything else?
Any other questions? All right, Woody, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we give him a round of applause. Well, I want to thank all of you for letting us give you a little flavor of El Dorado County, both from the tour in the morning as well as from our presentations, just to give you a little bit more insight. I know many of you have come through many times, but we just wanted to give that extra special touch. So I really appreciate everybody being here today. Thank you very much. So with that, we will go to our reports, and I'll open up the floor if anybody would like to make an announcement or comment.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I think it's relevant since we were on a Capitol Corridor bus this morning. So I'm the vice chair of the Capitol Corridor Joint Powers Authority. We had our board meeting yesterday, and they're anticipating ridership will increase significantly in the coming years, returning to pre-pandemic levels. So
that's great news.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You. Just to let you know, on Saturday, it is hot, chili, cool cars. We don't have apples and we don't have peaches, but we have hot, chili, and cool cars. 10 o'clock Saturday, downtown Rockland. We shut down the main street on Rockland Road. There'll be about 10,000 people come and a little over 200 cars. And during COVID, we had to get creative when we couldn't have the big event. So we made a car cruise Friday night, which has turned out to be ridiculously popular. So Friday night at 6 o'clock, we will have 200 classic cars just driving the streets of Rockland and waving and very confusing people as we go by. Love to have you there. And then the following Sunday, the 29th, we have a little amphitheater there, and I would welcome anybody to join it. It is Three Dog Night on the 29th. So if you want to sing a little Jeremiah Was a Bullfrog, call me.
Love it.
Thank you, Director Gallardo. Yes.
And if you want to come to Placer County again and come to Loomis on 5th, we're going to have the Eggplant Festival. So, that we actually did peaches.
Great. What time is that event?
10 to 4.
10 to 4. All right. All right. Any other announcements? All right, seeing none, I will move to the receive and file, which I'll let all of you read at your leisure.
Chair Saragosa, I know I'm the only thing standing between you and noon. Real quick.
Yes.
So October committees and board, you heard a little bit of the AB 350 legislation discussion that is coming back for action. We're going to give you an update on the transportation project list that we started talking to you all about for the blueprint. On that theme of like ATP, and it's a skinny list, it's lean. Reminder, we have not yet hit our greenhouse gas target this cycle. It's going to be tough. So we're working staff to staff, working with all your staff, but we're going to give you an update on that. That's for adoption November. And then finally, we're going to have a great board workshop in October, actually on street safety, pedestrian safety, and a report called Dangerous by Design. It's not great news because our traffic fatalities are going up, but really important. And then final reminder, 9 a.m. We're going to be back in the boardroom in October for the full board meeting, but 9 a.m. So mark your calendars and see you there.
Thank you, James. And please remember to take some fruit home with you. Especially there's some special pears for Director Baines. But no, please enjoy some fruit for the ride home. And then for those staying for lunch, just find me and we'll wander over to the Independent, which is just really a short walk from here.
There are brown bags to take your produce home, so fill them up and enjoy.
Don't be excited.